Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back Jared Jones.
Thank you, everyone, for coming back. I am so excited, not just about being here for this event, but specifically for this panel. It's truly an honor. I get to talk to some incredible professionals and now some new friends about stuff that I'm personally deeply passionate about, stuff that I've been working on that isn't my 9-to-5 day job or part of my resume, but really is a part of who I am and how I think about showing up to work every day in technology as a sector. These folks all have incredible experiences that are extremely differentiated and unique, and I'm just really excited to be here with all of them, highlight their experiences, and just have a conversation about some really important stuff that's happening in our industry, about how we can build more inclusivity into our products, into our organizations, why that matters, and how that can actually work. So first, I'd love to quickly hear from all of our panelists, just a quick introduction on who you are, and then we can dive right in.
Awesome. I guess I'll start. Hi, everybody. I'm Asya Bradley. I'm a senior partner at Mendoza Ventures. Prior to this, I was a founder, so this is my first foray into full-time VC investing, and it's pretty exciting. But prior to this, founder of Kinley, which was formerly known as First Boulevard, neobank that empowers Black America, and on the founding team of Synapse Financial Technologies, which I know many of you are built on top of as well, along with some other stints with Silla Money and Socure as well.
I'm Joan Susie. Hi, guys. I am the chairman of Finex Tech and bank director, but have been recently pursuing investors and entrepreneurs that are dealing with an older and aging population.
Great. Thanks, Joan. I'm Julie Rasmussen. I'm the founder and CEO of SheBanks, which is a fintech for women. I come from a background in fast-moving consumer goods. I'm a serial entrepreneur, and previously have scaled a direct-to-consumer company from 0 to 100 million. And I'm delighted to be here today.
I'm Jason Hendricks. I'm the CEO of Alloy Labs, and I know what you're all thinking. Thank God there's a straight white male up there to talk to me about diversity. So Alloy Labs, we're a consortium of over 70 community banks, and creating more inclusive products has been a key initiative for us over the last 5 years that has taken us in a lot of interesting directions. And 2 years ago, we did a study around our membership, and what we found is our banks, which tend to be the most innovative, over-index on women in executive positions at 5x the national average for Fortune 500, right? And said, that's an interesting corollary. However, when we look around the room when we're all together or on a Zoom, we are vanilla ice cream. And so this last year, we launched a special program to work with minority depository institutions around how do we create better bridges between our banks and MDIs.
Awesome. Yeah, let's give a round of applause, please. So, elephant in the room, in the tech sector in general, diversity, inclusion, we're failing, or at least there's a lot of room to be improved. Fintech has been one of those concepts or verticals where it's really been touted for a long time that, hey, this is a way that we can actually provide access, we can open things up, we can include more people into the financial system. Have we moved the needle? Is that actually happening? Would love to hear kind of a few thoughts on, is fintech working for broadening the funnel, creating diverse and inclusive communities and users within these segments? From your experience, how are we feeling about that?
Why is everyone looking at me?
Oh, well.
I'll go first.
Cool.
So I did a research paper on the global fintech phenomenon, which has been touted sort of as a fourth industrial revolution. And the United States was number like 47 in 2018 in adoption of fintech. The top leading 3 countries were China, India, and believe it or not, Russia. So I found this really kind of shocking, and I had been living abroad, so when I came back to the US, I experienced really how far behind the US banking industry is in innovation. And then, I think we can look into the future and say, we see where fintech is going to go. It's going to go where it has gone globally in other countries. To your point, I think there is progress being made, but I think that we're just getting started, really, is what I think.
I would say it's an abject failure.
Wow.
I agree with you, Joan.
An abject failure.
Abject failure. Expand.
I would say if you look at populations that you're talking about when we talk about inclusion, let's just take a look at the population I'm talking about. There's 10,000 people turning 65 every day, and there's about 6 or 7 products that are successful at dealing with that population. They have 83% of the net worth of the country, and no one's designing for them.
Can you say that again?
They have 83% of the personal net worth of the country.
But we have, what, 6 or 7?
But Joan, people know old people don't use technology, right?
And they're all one lump, right?
Yeah.
They don't have
they're all
jobs, they don't do caretaking, they're just one thing. You've seen one 75-year-old, you've seen every 75-year-old.
That's fascinating because we're talking about just this niche and as you described it, abject failure. That's a niche. This is one category. There's everything else, right? There's gender, there's race, we're talking about age. Probably can expand out those failures to other categories as well.
We talk a lot about meritocracy in fintech space, in VC space, and anything that is tech related. We always talk about this meritocracy that is going to reward those that work hard, right? And it's such a slap in the face because it's almost like saying women, BIPOC individuals, LGBTQ folks are not working hard. And that's why we're getting less than 2% of the VC funding. Does any of us, do any of us believe that? Do any of us believe that these folks here, we're not working hard and that's why we don't deserve this funding? So I feel like if we really truly did apply the true terms of meritocracy in America and in our industries in which we're operating right now, this would not be the situation, which is why I have to agree with Joan when I say it is an abject failure. It is. We're saying the words, we're not walking the walk.
Yeah.
Well, and I think one of the places it falls down, it turns out innovation is really effing hard. In that even when we try and go after that, I want to create the neobank of X or Y, we end up at the affinity layer and we create community, and it might be founded by people of color or people who identify as certain gender. But you have to get down to what's actually actionable, right? So when I worked for Michael Porter, we had this concept around called action segmentation. And if there is not an actual action you would take on this segment versus that segment, it got thrown out, right? You had to collapse these things. And I think too many of these banks are at the affinity layer. And there are some that are doing good things. Disclosure, I'm an investor. In this one, it's Totem is a neobank for Native Americans. And what I love about what Amber and Richard's in the audience, raise your hand and wave, have created, it turns out there's some very actionable things that Native Americans haven't had access to. And this is part of Amber's own walk, that from her tribe, there were a bunch of services that were available to her for purchasing a home. Except no bank actually knew how to go do that and access the service. Actually set back her home buying by over 18 months. And there's a point of connectivity between how tribes disperse money to the tribal members, right? That you have to be part of this group and get into it, but it's deep in the stack innovation, not the, oh, look it, we have a picture of a powwow on your debit card. That's great, that's diversity.
Well, and in the end, she wasn't even able to take advantage of those government programs that she was trying to access. So she was set back 18 months, and Amber's like a superstar.
And then gave up.
And then just gave up, but then realized, hey, I need to build something to make it so that everybody else doesn't have to give up these funds. Because these funds are made available at the governmental level, but no one can access them. And it's the same, it's like just building on what you said, Jason, is that we need to start building products that are innovative, designing products, coding for products that are innovative, but how do you do that when you're having to do that on top of these incumbent sort of very legacy processes, legacy, the compliance piece? How do you get over the compliance hurdle that still rejects me? I'm a green card holder in this country. I'm a Canadian citizen. right? I've traveled the world. I'm a professional executive that has been all over the world. Yet even now, I tried to apply for a VeroBank card, and I got rejected by VeroBank. I get rejected by so many of my portcos because, you know, I happen to be a brown woman that moved to America just 7 years ago.
Hey, Varo, you guys out there? I think I saw some.
Oh, they know I tweeted. They did not respond. That was when they were running their ad of like the bank for everyone. It was like everyone but me.
Oh man. Well, let's see if we can get Asia into Varo. I don't think we want any more tweets. we have a lot of issues. We've talked about a lot of issues, and they've kind of gone everywhere, right? I mean, we have access issues, we have infrastructure issues, we have organizations that haven't necessarily prioritized or don't know how to build inclusion in diverse organizations from the inside out. Where do we start? I mean, like, the problems are so big, and our industry is so vast and so rooted. Where do we start? Do we have ideas about where that starting point is for either individuals or companies? Like, I'd love to hear about that.
Joan and I were talking about that, remember last night, that there are actual processes in place that should guide organizations on how to do that. Maybe you can actually.
Well, there's hiring guidelines.
Yeah.
Okay, so like if you want to make a more diverse workplace so that you have people that you actually want to serve as part of the development group, as part of the business organization, as part of what you're doing, then there are ways to get at that information that already exists. If you want to develop for an older population, there's WCAG's 2.2, which will tell you about ADA compliant websites. That's going to solve a lot of problems for a lot of people with sight and hearing issues. There are places to start where you can get information about best practices that will help speed things along when it comes to the development piece.
I really love that, because not only are some of these issues, you know, challenging and systemic, they're also intimidating. But what I think I'm hearing you say is, for developers, for product managers, for founders, there are certain things that, the playbooks, if you will, and hey, you can take some small steps programmatically to improve your product or your offering that actually does make it more inclusive. And I think that's awesome, because some of the stuff, most of the stuff, is not programmatic. We can look at it and say, that's a problem, but shit, how do I actually take that first step? And it sounds like there are playbooks out there.
Well, for some of that, I think the biggest problem personally is distribution. It's like trying to get meaningful partners to help move products to market and give that first great theater of, you know, here's proof of concept and I show it and I can scale it. And that's hard for some of these groups. I mean, that's really hard to get a trusted partner, because with all of these groups, they've been so underwhelmed by the products they've been given by people to make money on them, that you basically have to have a trusted partner that will walk in with you and say, yes, we actually understand the tribal system. Yes, we understand some of your.
Well, and that's one of the ways we've been most successful. We have an accelerator called the Concept Lab, and it intentionally takes startups that don't think they sell to banks, right? They're not lending systems and these other things. They don't think they're doing bank tech. And I'll give you an example. We partnered with a startup out of New York called Careful, who you know, right? It is an aging platform. It's for adult children and caretakers to take care of mom and dad's finances. And if you're not in the middle of this right now, trust me, it is an epic disaster when you try to get into your parents' finances. And we came to him and was like, hey, we see this problem around aging, and your VC said you're doing something cool. Do you want to partner with us? And they're like, why would we partner with you? It's like, because we have old people, and guess what? They trust us. And guess what? We have crappy products. You have good products. Well, let's go do this together. And it's been wildly successful, right? Because they don't have this incumbency. They don't have to, make sure that, they have the checking accounts and the corporate and the SMB, like the lane of business. They can go out and innovate wildly, and we can be the distribution partner for them.
Let's talk a little bit about I'd love to hear from you a little bit about the impact, the results on that, right? I mean, obviously there was sounds like a groundswell of people that kind of moved over. Does that mean more money for your product? Does that mean more money for the bank? Like, what's the actual output on that?
So that's what we do in the concept lab, right? The idea is develop a use case together. What's the business model that everyone wins? That the customer wins, that the startup wins, and the bank wins. And so what does the bank need? So the first bank they launched with, the cooperative bank, Pete Lee, who heads their innovation group, who's hilarious. He's describing, he goes, our number one source of customer attrition is death. Right? Think about that for a second. And he's like, everyone laughed. He goes, I'm not kidding. It really is our number one source of customer attrition. And he goes, we could not digitally market our way out of a paper bag. So how do we get this next generation? And what they did, and I thought this was brilliant in terms of how the innovation took place, they sent a postcard, a physical postcard, to everyone over the age of 65 that was a customer and said, we understand that aging is hard and you need to invite helpers in. We would love to go on that journey with you. You can come into the branch or call us and we will talk to you about this, right? And so from Careful's perspective, they're like, yeah, we're venture backed. We just closed our seed with you. We can't call people, right? That is not part of our customer acquisition plan. And it was wildly impactful in terms of the number of adult children who have real adult financial needs that moved over, said it's just that much easier and I want to bank at a place that delivers this kind of value to me. And I can tell you, in having a father who has dementia and taking over their finances, it is hard and it's horrible. The gray charges, we lived with them for 18 months when we moved to Minnesota and we're doing a renovation in COVID. The number of people who call and are asking for donations, and then we have 3 subscriptions to Time Magazine. Why? Because he got a renewal notice, he renewed. Next month there's another renewal notice, right? Careful takes care of all of that. They just didn't know how to get it into the hands of customers that would trust them.
Yeah. Just a quick other issue is that they have huge numbers of sources of income. So basically they're having a little P&L, right? So I've got my Social Security and I've got my investment income and I've got my little gig job and there's nothing that's saying, okay, this is what here's the impact of taxes, here's how you're going to run your P&L, basically. Yeah. So if you're a caretaker, you're sort of creating your own P&L every time you're starting to take care of another person. Yeah. So there's a huge opportunity and many of these people are women. The vast majority of people over 65, well, not the vast, but the people.
Well, they hit the aging number you told me last night, like the intersection of how long women live and how long that time period could be.
Right.
Well, this is what we found in our research, and to Jason's point, is it just affinity marketing where they put the picture of the woman on their product and they think that is going to bring women customers and answer their specific needs? This simply doesn't work. It's like, if you've written an app in Python for a platform that runs Java, it's just not going to work. It's not a good fit. And it has to go way beyond affinity to actionable items. And a study by BNY Mellon just revealed that 76% of asset managers admit their default customer is a man. The default product is made for a male investor. And they're great products, and there are a lot of great products out there. But it's not just the marketing, because a marketing firm, Kantar, says that 85% of marketing that targets women also report is alienating or misses the mark. The financial industry speaks the language of numbers. Communities of women, they use a different language. It's more emotive and relationship based. They have a different buying psychology when it comes to buying financial products and services. It's much more important to build a community of trust first. It takes longer. There's more investment in building the relationship, but then a woman will buy 3 or 4 products from you, whereas a man will look at the facts, look at the product, look at the functionality, say, yeah, it's a reputable company, yeah, I'll buy it. And then he moves on. So he may, you may only get that one transaction from that. So it's just a very different dynamic.
Yeah, I love this kind of idea that we all understand we have to do better, and we started at this place with affinity. It's really easy to get to the point where you're building a neobank, right? We don't have something that works for this group of people, but we're in a room full of builders, and I think that idea of moving from, hey, this is a great idea or something that we should do, we don't quite know how it will manifest or how to get there, but we know we should do it, but then taking that action to actually move the needle for the actual change, I think that hopefully would resonate well with the crowd here. It certainly resonates deeply with me. I'd love to hear thoughts on incentives, right? I mean, we've talked about how we can, some of the problems. We've talked about why they're problems. We've kind of glanced on what the actual incentive is, if at all, for founders, builders to incorporate these things. Sure, we have lots of data points, but does our industry need different or better incentives to change the way that they've built their infrastructure, their teams, their organizations, their products? Do those incentives exist today? And if so, how should they change, and how should we be thinking about those incentives to actually make more inclusive products?
Well, in my case, it's really simple. I've worked with tens of thousands of women micro-entrepreneurs, and I know their struggles firsthand, managing family responsibilities, job responsibilities, and budgeting responsibilities. But even I did not realize that the global market for financial products and services for women, if they use them at a same rate as men, is between $300 and $700 billion. It's just massive.
Wow.
And in the United States alone, there's 100 million women between the ages of 20 and 64, and there's probably another 20 or 30 million between 65 and 95. And their needs are simply not being met. So again, you have to build a native app. It's an ill fit if you just take existing products and then try to put a different face on them or say, hey, this has been slightly modified for you. It's just never going to work as something that is built native right from the ground up, from the customer's needs point of view. What is their biggest pain point? What's their biggest problem? Okay, let's build something in a green field that addresses that versus trying to adapt something that already exists.
Yeah, definitely. I think, there's this idea, at least I've been programmed in the industry in my work over the last 15 years in software, where you see this trend, we need to go back a generation, right? Everybody would move when I was early in my career. The big focus was millennials. They're the next generation. We have to figure out how to build solutions for them. They're going to take over the world. And right now, big focus on Gen Z. How do we engage with them? How do we build products and services for them? Because we have so much time to capture their audience, their wealth, their eyeballs, everything. But Joan, we were talking about this last night, maybe there should be a different perspective on how we start to talk to our audience and build products for them.
In 2030, there will be more people over the age of 65 than under the age of 18. They will have more of the wealth, and they will have generally a 25-year lifespan ahead of them. Okay, so that's a long time to have a financial relationship with someone. And they'll have increasing needs and pay for those needs.
Most of the startups that are starting aren't going to be here for 25 years. So you can start a product today and capture all of that wealth and exit that thing hopefully very happily and still have a great product. So I love that.
So Joan introduced me to this book called Stage Not Age, and I want to extrapolate it from the aging process and bring it back to developers. The importance of one breaking up that segment instead of thinking of Gen Z as an entire segment, because Gen Z that is single versus Gen Z that just had twins are in a very different stage of life, right? They might be the same age, they might live in similar housing in a similar zip code with similar incomes, completely different life. So context becomes everything. And I think too often when we approach product and development, we don't think enough about the context of how this product is going to be used and what that person is doing in that moment. And so since Joan introduced me to that as a phrase, I probably use it daily to say, contextually, what is the actual stage, not the age or the demographic of the problem we're trying to solve?
It's about transitions. It's like, and that can be at any age. You can be 30 and getting married. You can be 70 and getting married. You can be 20 and buying your first house. You can be 60 and a recent widow and buying your first house alone. It's like, I think that people, and I think that that's true of a lot of the things that are going on, is that people are putting a lot of things in a bucket and thinking that that bucket is uniform and homogeneous, and it's not.
Yeah, this is a really good point. you know, Women's World Banking likes to say, you know, women are the single largest underserved group in financial services. But this is by no means a monolithic market, right? You know, women are as different as every single individual in this room. So it's very important. And I think using the stage of your life journey is very important. So we segment the market. Obviously, I come from a consumer products background. And so we have at least, you know, 9 different distinct user personas based on the stage where they are in their life journey, you know.
What are some of the reasons why you think that this is a marketable? You're obviously investing and trying to create this inclusion. What do you think are some of the areas where there's an opportunity that should be great, but are like not as well pursued?
Yeah, I mean, so we do invest a lot in some of the early stage companies, and what we're really looking at often is what is the structure of the team. And we look at the structure of the team not just in terms of who are the founders, but also who are going to be the builders, who are going to be the designers of this product. And that I think is really key. So as we're building products, is that have we brought the right people to the table to actually inform the design of this product and then the build of the product itself? One of the examples that I give is that, you know, one of the companies that I was at, we were building this really great AI product. And a lot of our developers happened to be young Indian men. And so when we trained our algorithm, we used a lot of Bollywood actresses because like that was just good to look at, right? And so we had all this like this.
Every Indian in the crowd is smiling right now as I look at it. So.
All the Indian men are like, yes, Sridevi is the best. So we're like, you know, we're training this algorithm on these really gorgeous Bollywood actresses and actors. And then, you know, when we wanted to make it more diverse, we went to Hollywood actors and actresses. But then when we actually tested it on the market for certain customers that were maybe skewing more toward the Black population or more towards the aging population, then we found that the algorithm did not work and it was actually discriminatory against very specific communities, right? And that's very counter to what we're trying to do. Now, if we'd had a more diverse team, then maybe we wouldn't have trained the algorithm just using gorgeous people, right?
It's incredible. I mean, yeah, the story is both hilarious, but also an incredible real-life example of implicit bias showing up in our products and what that can do and an unintended consequence of not hiring or building or putting the right people or a diverse set of people in the actual room to build and test and train.
People, right? Like we weren't bad people. We weren't like trying to discriminate. It just wasn't like enough of a diverse crowd in the room to sort of point out that difference. Yeah. You know, so where maybe I would have joined in and been like, hey, like I don't see a lot of older women in this algorithm training. Yeah. You know, why aren't we looking at older women? And so those are the kind of things that, you know, and just like simple examples, like I joined this team and my team was so sweet. They were like, oh, let us get you some maternity swag, right? I mean, which company thinks of that? But, you know, my company did because I happen to work with a woman who has had children and who has dealt with the struggle of maternity clothing. And so I didn't get like a men's extra large shirt from her. I literally got like a maternity t-shirt with our logo on it.
I'm scanning the room for Moov marketing right now so we can get some Moov maternity.
Oh, you guys had the Moov nail stickers?
We had nail stickers, but I think we need some Moov maternity or maybe some Fintech DevCon maternity swag. Right? That'd be awesome.
But that's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about, where it's like, it's very human. We're all human. We're not bad people, but we are humans and we're programmed a certain way. And so if we don't pull these folks in, like if you're designing for an aging population, if you don't have that demographic on your team, how can you build this? Like I saw this one startup that was pitching to me and they were pitching a period product. And the founders were like a gay man, right? Gay white man. And it's like women that were in their 60s that were like post-menopausal. And then I thought, okay, I love you guys. I love this idea, but I don't really believe that you are the right people to build this. And their team didn't consist of decision makers. Like they may have, you always have these companies where you've got like a bunch of Black people down at the, you know, junior levels, right? But they're not.
They hit the numbers.
Right? Yeah. You hit the number, you're like, hey, look at my website. And then they you know, kind of pepper them all over the page so that you don't see that they're at the bottom of the line. You know? Yeah. But it's stuff like that where like I once interviewed at a company where everybody was white or actually I didn't interview, but they reached out. Everybody was white, even their dog was white. So they had a dog on their like team page.
Yeah.
It was like Chiefs. I mean, well, we have a dog, but he's brown.
Yeah, I think Asya makes a really good point here. I mean, things tend to be created in the image of their creators. It's just natural. It's not a judgment. This is just how we are wired. And I remember back to when Apple first launched their credit card. Whether this is true or not, I don't know, but it was reported that it was rejecting women who were very well qualified. And everyone's like, oh, it's so evil and everything. And I'm thinking, it's not evil. It just was probably made by a bunch of white guys. And, you know, they just, so it's like when you say the financial industry has trouble connecting with women or it's dominated by men, this is not a judgment. You know, they're not doing this on purpose. I don't think they're doing this on purpose. It's just the natural evolution of the way things happen. They speak a certain language
Well, they're also
that women
not
don't relate to.
incentivized. They're also not incentivized. So going back to your point, you know, Jared, is that they're not incentivized.
Yeah.
The financial industry, the incumbents, right, the legacy organizations that we actually end up having to work with as fintechs, they are not incentivized to do anything beyond the status quo. Maintaining the status quo gives them success in their careers. If they maintain their status quo, don't take any unnecessary risks, they will continue up that ladder, become SVPs, become global heads of whatever, right? They will not fail. They can just stay on that conveyor belt and continuously go up. That is not a meritocracy.
Yeah, I think this is also a really good point. Corporate structures are inherently conservative and risk averse. This is what makes innovation so hard, especially if you're coming from a banking industry. You know, that one of their major activities is to try to control and manage risk. And what's the reward for taking a huge risk? Well, you have a 98% chance of failure, you know? So, yeah, no one is incentivized to take that
We need
risk.
more examples of people doing it well.
But also, let me just one quick thing, which is there is other risk that people are not taking into advantage, which is if all the kids born today are going to live to 100, or if there's so much talent in diverse communities, if you don't take care of them, you're going to lose a huge percentage of your population over time. I mean, that's attrition, and so it doesn't feel like an emergency, and it doesn't feel like a crisis. So the risk is very poorly weighed.
It's poorly understood, and I mean, it'd be interesting to hear Jason's take on this. You know, banks do make so much money, right? And they're the incumbents. And we see fintech starting to eat away at those profit pools. What do you see happening?
I mean, it's not happening fast enough, right? That there's this belief that the system can go on for a very long time, and I'd love to recommend, it comes out later this month, Allison Netzer and Liz High wrote a book called Think Like a Brand, Not a Bank. And there's 8 bullet points of the whole book. It's page 57 if you just want to read that part. That really impacted me, and it said, the bank thinks about the bank first, right, is how it approaches. Secondly, it thinks about how do I protect the bank, how do I make money for the bank, and they think of the people who use their services as customers, not people first, right?
Interesting.
And it said brands approach it exactly the opposite, you know, approach. And if you look at who's leading most of these banks, well, they're older, probably heavier white men like me who grew up in the risk department and wearing khaki pants. Right?
You're not heavy. What are you talking about?
Right, but they came up, you know, through risk, and so they have a certain profile, which is don't take risk, manage risk.
Yeah.
And I think to Asia's point, I want to bring this back on some of the dev, is we can sometimes look and feel like we have a diverse organization. And in the macro, that might be true, but if you look at certain populations like product or marketing or your devs, suddenly it might be a lot less diverse than you think. You know, just calling out the stereotypes, it's like you go look in dev and you're suddenly gonna see, oh, it's a lot of, you know, nerdy white males and Indians. And you go to marketing, it's like, oh, suddenly this is where all the females are hanging out. And what ends up happening is you end up with these micro silos that you say, hey, look, you know, we're diverse, we're, you know, X% this, that, and the next thing, except in the silos, you're actually not. Yeah. And Anthemis Group did this really interesting study as it relates to the evolution of a startup and gender diversity in the tech departments. And what they found is basically from 0 to 5 employees, hire anyone in the hell that wants to work with you that might actually be qualified. Like, their only qualification needs to be that they're competent and they're willing to come work for you in a high-risk environment. But between 5 and 10, if you don't actually have women in a position of leadership on the technical team, by the time you cross 10 and you're headed to 20, you never actually recoup it, right? No matter how much effort you put against it, because you set this cultural tide that cannot be undone.
It's not just leadership though, it's influence, right? I mean, we can put titles on people, we can org them in different directions, but if they're not truly empowered to effectuate the change that they know that they could be making in the organization, then it actually is maybe a fool's errand. So it's really important, I think, for builders, founders, and leaders to not just be thinking about, hey, I need to have a C-suite woman or a C-suite person.
Just shove in marketing, right? Like,
exactly.
CMO, right?
Yeah. It's important to understand the empowerment.
Chief people officer.
Yeah, and the agency that you're not doing this to check the box or to say, hey, it's a good thing to do. It's actually, this is how I build a robust, sustainable, scalable business that maximizes my ROI in the long term. That's what I think hasn't been clearly articulated to, I think, the industry and our founders very clearly. There's not a lot of great examples. So if there are examples of people, processes, organizations that you think are doing it well, I think we should give them our flowers. I think we should call them out, talk about those people. I know personally, I watched a transformation happen while I was at GitHub on this idea of culture and diversity and inclusion, and they deserve a lot of credit for what they did. They deserve a lot of critical feedback on what could have gone better. But are there people and organizations that you think, wow, I really, what they're doing is resonating with me, their vision is, or I think that they're doing it well?
Well, I think Anthemis, like if people don't follow Anthemis Group, the London and New York-based venture firm, they've been publishing a lot of phenomenal stuff and getting deep into some of this technical stuff that
Can you say that name one more time?
Anthemis.
Anthemis, okay.
I'll have to look that up. I think to Jason's point, our HR department always used to like to say, like hires like. So if you don't have that, insemination of diversity when you first begin, your organization will continue to grow.
Or as soon as you can.
As soon as you can. The other thing is the studies have been done that in order for underrepresented members to really have influence, like I've often been the only woman in a high-level executive room, the only woman on the board, the chairman of the board, the only woman in the room. That was fine for me because I'm very assertive and I don't have any problem, saying what I want to say. But if you're not like that, they say you need to have at least 25 to 35% of the group needs to be the underrepresented members for them not to feel just like an isolated, I'm the token woman here, or gee, I better not say anything because that's not what the prevailing view in this room is, and I'm going to be like, oh yeah, she's the weirdo, she's the odd one out. So you really have to have representation across the board, and like to Jason's point, if this is 100% women and this is 100% men, but they're siloed, you don't really have 50-50 representation. I
want to build on that for a second. So this is more important than just social imperative. It is actually good business and it has an ROI. And as an example of that, 2008, Dan O'Malley, Kurt Wright, and I co-founded Perk Street, one of the first challenger banks. You have 3 white Ivy League educated males, starting this business. And our culture, and we recruited a lot from, Capital One and First Marblehead, right? Some of these very intellectually kind of powerhouse places. Our culture was described to us in an anonymous survey as when Dan and Jason are in a room together, it's an intellectual cage match, right? Real positive. And so we're like, we need to actually change up the number of voices and how it's heard. And like, we also realized we were very white and male-centric, and like, that isn't who we wanted to be, because we had found out like middle-aged moms in the suburbs were now our target demo. That's who uses a high rewards debit card, right? So we need to involve this. And there was this unexpected and unintended consequence of it, that is we had more diversity in the room. people who normally didn't speak up began to speak up. The developer that was looking at the marketing is like, well, that's a stupid idea, but I'm a developer, what do I know? I'm just gonna shut up. Once we actually had greater diversity and created more space for other people to speak, more voices were being heard, and we actually began to move a lot faster and had a lot more insights.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
The other thing we'll see, and this is also just a statistic, entry-level jobs are pretty well balanced, 50-50 men and women, but then what happens as the talent funnel approaches the C-suite, it goes like this. The women drop out because they're usually having kids or getting married or doing something. They never get back up to this 50-50 parity, even though it starts off here. And so that is the system, that is systemic dropout, right? The system is not accommodating of this dip here. And you can never get back up onto this upper curve. So that's just a really graphic example of how the funnel doesn't work, it's broken.
Well, one of the ways to even fix that is by providing more services for men.
Yeah.
Which sounds counterintuitive, right? But when you start offering parental leave and not just maternity leave, that makes a difference, because now you're giving permission to men to actually be fathers. And we haven't done that in the past. In the past, the definition of father has been the individual in this partnership that leaves the house and makes money and then comes in and complains when they have to spend time with the children, right? And so now when you open that up, and that's again part of these different policies and different incentivization that you can give to an organization, is that how do you build an engineering team, a product team, an entire organization that is truly inclusive of every individual. And to assume that, you know, only women need maternity leave, I think is insulting of all men out there. And you all men should be offended by that, and you all men should be demanding your rights to be fathers if you so choose.
It's offending. It's offensive to the new idea of family structures.
Yeah. I think it's also a tremendous burden the way the society is, and we can talk about socialization of girls and boys from the very beginning, you know. Are men more socialized to think about money and understand that they might have a primary wage, you know, earning role in a family, but what a burden that is, right? You know, it's a lot of pressure.
This brings it to a different thing, which is employers. And let's think about this as caregiving, okay? One of the reasons why people don't achieve as much in their careers is because they have to spend a certain number of hours caregiving. Pivotal Ventures is really involved in trying to create solutions for caregiving. Some employers are giving benefits and also fintech benefits about how to schedule caregiving for your children or your older adult. So caregiving as an idea, like think through that, which is how are you handling caregiving in your organization, and does that affect who gets to rise? Because disproportionately, women are involved in it. Disproportionately, people who have less economic means are more hands-on as caregivers. Disproportionately, people who have kids need more caregiving. So like it does really matter to sort of take a look at some of those bigger, broader issues. What is the definition of a parent? Does that mean it's a male, female parent? But also, what's the larger definition of caregiving in the community?
Well, I saw this ad on Twitter, and they talked about, it was for a product or an insurance product, I can't remember, it was like a benefit, social, like an insurance benefit, that allowed you to pay your family members, right, who care for your children. And so the ad, though, was like, now you can pay grandma to watch your kids. And the ad was a woman with, you know, her mother, presumably. And it just boiled my blood, because I was like, well, can we pay grandpa?
Yeah.
You know, am I allowed to pay my uncle? Am I allowed to pay my brother? Or can I only pay grandma? Like, when does grandma get to rest, for Christ's sake,
Exactly, and we have to break these things down 100%.
This both acknowledges the problem and perpetuates it at the same time.
So caregiving is really one of those things where if we had better caregiving in this country, just in general, if we had better caregiving solutions financially, there's fintech opportunities there, because there's people to pay, there's people to, there's payments that need to be made for those people. There's a whole sorts of the management you're talking about your demented dad, that's caregiving. That's financial caregiving. So there's a whole bunch of things that you could unpack there, and solving those issues would impact the diversity of the workforce.
We've had a ton of really insightful kind of nuggets given to us and the audience. Huge problems that we've obviously solved all the problems for our industry just now.
Yes,
Thank
I'm
you,
glad we
everyone.
solved all
We
those
haven't
problems.
actually, of course, we never will. I'd love really quickly as we wrap up, since we can't continue the conversation, if there's folks in the audience that want to continue the conversation with any one of you individually, quickly give a shout out on how they can maybe either find you on the interwebs or at the conference. Just go down the line so people know how they can get in touch with you.
For sure. So LinkedIn, really easy way, because then I can actually put a face to the name. LinkedIn is great, but I'm also here at the conference rest of the day. So feel free to scan my card and connect with me there. But LinkedIn is usually great. My Twitter DMs are also always open, and always open to have a conversation with anyone.
Cool.
LinkedIn or email, and I'm also going to be here all day.
Cool.
Also, LinkedIn and Twitter. You can just Google me on search me on LinkedIn. I'm also on Twitter.
At Jason Hendricks on Twitter is the easiest way to get me to respond. I'll be here for most of the day. And then if you're interested, Alex Johnson of Fintech Takes and I are doing a live recording tonight of Hot Wings and Hot Takes. That will be a hot sauce and alcohol infused rant.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. Definitely come to this.
Cool. Thank you. Please, everyone, help me giving a warm round of applause for our panelists today. Thank you so much. What an honor.
Good job, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
It was fun.